motion be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Dobell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to support the motion moved by the Prime Minister, the Honourable Tony Abbott, acknowledging the 100th anniversary of the landing at Gallipoli. And I stand in this parliament representing the electorate of Dobell, who only a couple of weeks ago turned out en masse to pay their respects and honour our ANZACs. Local ceremonies witnessed record crowds as tens of thousands of locals attended dawn, morning and afternoon ANZAC ceremonies. This attendance demonstrates the significance of the legend and the spirit of the ANZACs. A century ago, young Australians forged a legacy that today has stood the test of time. On the 25th of April 1915, during the pre-dawn hours, members of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps landing at Gapatepi, now known as ANZAC Cove. This landing was part of a larger strategy to provide support to Russia against a German attack. The landing at Gallipoli was designed to block any Turkish retreat from the south, as well as reinforcements that were advancing from the north. History will remember that it was a doomed strategy. The landing quickly deteriorated into a long and terrible day. This day quickly became a week, then a month, and did not cease until the evacuation of our troops was completed on the 20th of December 1915. 8,141 Australians paid the ultimate sacrifice. The ANZACs we lost joined more than 40,000 British Empire and French troops and 85,000 Turks who all paid the ultimate sacrifice. This was a horrific loss of human life, a toll that our young nation had never experienced before. In total, 417,000 men volunteered and enlisted to fight in the 1st Australian Imperial Force. In 1914, Australia's population was 4.9 million. Australia's casualty rate was almost 65%, with more than 61,000 killed in action and a further 155,000 wounded in action. On the Gallipoli battlefield, the ANZAC legend was born, a legend of courage, mateship and sacrifice. And as Australians, we each remember and reflect upon the spirit of ANZAC and on those who served Australia throughout the Great War. For my family, we remember Private Ernest Marshall Baskerville, my husband John's late great-uncle. Ernest was a farmer from Corindai in New South Wales. And on the 11th of December 1915, Ernest departed Australia from Sydney on board RMS Moulton as a member of the 1st Infantry Battalion 9 to 12 reinforcements. In September 1917, Ernest was injured at the Battle of Polygon Wood in France. A month later, in October, Ernest Marshall Baskerville died of his wounds at Le Treport in the northwest of France. Ernest Marshall Baskerville's story is just one of 5,770 Australians who were killed at the Battle of Polygon Wood. And it's just one of the 61,000 stories of Australians who paid the ultimate sacrifice during World War I. And I recall visiting Ernest's grave some years ago, and as I paid my respects in the small cemetery, I was touched by the ages of those whose final resting place is half a world away from home. And as a mother, I grieve for the mothers who never saw their son's final resting place. The thought of your child heading off to war and leaving behind their family to never return is a hard one to fathom. The war and its consequences penetrates all corners of Australia. Private Hector Philip Crane was born and lived in Wyong. Hector was a 23-year-old labourer who took the oath to join the army on May the 11th, 1915. He was appointed private of the Liverpool Depot 9th Reinforcements 13th Battalion. On March the 15th, 1917, Hector was wounded in action when serving his nation in France. He died of his wounds a few days later and was buried at Dermnacourt Communal Cemetery in France. Hector Philip Crane was awarded the 1914-15 Star, the British War Medal, the Victory Medal and qualified for the Memorial Plaque and Memorial War Roll. On ANZAC Day, 100 years on from the landing at Gallipoli, the Central Coast community joined together to remember the sacrifice of those Australians before them. Services at the entrance, Tukli, Arimba and Wyong saw record attendance and demonstrated the resilience of our community who had endured a testing week impacted by storms and floods. An estimated 10,000 people flocked to Memorial Park in the entrance, and as the dawn broke, we remembered the sacrifice that today allows us the opportunity to live in such a welcoming community. And as I attended various services, I heard inspirational stories of courage and sacrifice, and the tales were shared by young and old. From school students whose great-grandfathers had themselves landed on the shores of Gallipoli to returned servicemen who had left mates behind on the battlefields of Vietnam. The importance of the legacy of the ANZACs was appreciated by all, who took the time to reflect on the good fortune of modern Australia. And services throughout Dobell saw students from many of our local schools pay their respects, thanking the ANZACs for the world that they are growing up in today. And I was particularly proud of the number of young students who attended local services, eager to learn more of the ANZAC legend and to pay their respects. In the week that following Anzac Day, I was contacted by Carrie Wellham, principal of Brook Avenue Public School, with a special tale of two young Australians. And the story came from Len Blundell, Vice President of the Tuggerah Lakes National Servicemen's Association. And each year Len and his wife Gwen hand out rosemary sprigs to those in attendance at the entrance morning ceremony. And this year Gwen was approached by two young boys, TJ McMahon and Nathan Hughes, who offered to help hand out the rosemary to those arriving at the service. The boys went on to say that they'd also been at the dawn service and had waited at the entrance all morning in order to attend a second service. And their willingness to attend both services illustrates their respect and interest in the history of ANZAC and the significance of the commemoration. Both these boys were extremely polite, and they are a credit to their parents and our community through their good manners and willingness to help. This story confirmed to me that the ANZAC spirit is still alive, and the sacrifice of the ANZACs will be remembered long past this year's centenary commemorations. I'd also like to share the story of the Redfern Aboriginal ANZAC Day commemoration, held each year by the Aboriginal community to honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander servicemen and women, and those who served in non-military support roles. This year, the march was led by members of the Glen Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Centre in Dobell. The march not only recognises the original ANZACs who served at Gallipoli and on the Western Front, it also commemorates more than a century of service by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander servicemen and women. Respect was also paid to the women and other family who kept Indigenous families and communities together while loved ones were far away and after they returned. Across our community, regardless of race, religion or background, we join together to commemorate ANZAC. For many, the terror of war is incomprehensible. However, this doesn't prevent us as Australians from honouring those who gave their tomorrow for our today. And I would like to particularly thank my local RSL sub-branches, along with the Dobell Centenary of ANZAC Committee, whose efforts over the past year enabled our community to unite and pay homage to the ANZACs. And since my election, I've had the great pleasure of working with local RSL sub-branches, historical societies, surf clubs and Wyong Shire Council to ensure the Dobell community is well represented and benefits through the array of commemorative activities. The Dobell Centenary of ANZAC Committee considered many exceptional proposals that captured both the significance of the centenary and importance of community involvement in the commemoration. In the lead-up to ANZAC Day, I've had the opportunity to see these projects come to fruition, including Tukli RSL sub-branches, commemorative plaques at local schools, commemorative medallions for local school students provided by the Entrance Longjetty RSL sub-branch, Wyong Family Histories Group historical banners depicting the history of locals who fought for Australia in World War I. And congratulations to the members of Soldiers Beach Surf Lifesaving Community who marked ANZAC Day by participating in a commemorative row proceeding through the Dardanelles around the Gallipoli Peninsula and finishing south of ANZAC Cove. The boat they used was donated to the Turkish Surf Lifesaving Movement as a gift from the Soldiers Beach Surf Lifesaving Community. Wyong Shire Council Centenary of ANZAC flags that are proudly flying above the roads along the Entrance, Longjetty, Tukli, Wyong and Tuggerah Strait. The Tuggerah Lakes Marching Band commemorative shirts for their performance at the entrance morning service. And as I meet with local community groups, school students and other members of our community, I'm reminded of the community's determination to honour the ANZAC spirit and those who paid the ultimate sacrifice to provide our freedom. And I, along with our local RSL sub-branches, were united in our determination to make the Centenary of ANZAC a commemoration for all ages. And we're also fortunate here in Australia to live free of the horrors of war, and we must never forget the sacrifice and loss experienced to obtain such freedom. And it's our duty and responsibility to honour and remember the ANZAC spirit. And it will be our children's responsibility to inspire future generations of Australians to keep the eternal flame alight and the spirit forever in our thoughts. And I'm extremely proud to be working with a community passionate and dedicated to ensuring the Centenary of ANZAC is commemorated by all. And I'd like to personally thank the members of the Dobell ANZAC Centenary Committee for their time and assistance in ensuring our local community benefited from the best possible projects to mark the Centenary of ANZAC. I'd also like to thank the many members of the local organisations who volunteered their time to develop these projects on behalf of the broader community. The characteristics and qualities of the ANZACs live on in today's Defence Force men and women who proudly serve our nation. And since my election, I've had the absolute pleasure of participating in the Australian Defence Force Parliamentary Program. And the program provided me with a unique opportunity to obtain a practical understanding of the workings of the Australian Defence Force. And this year I travelled to the Middle East to visit troops in the UAE and Afghanistan. And my visit reinforced my belief that we are truly blessed to call Australia home. And I'm in awe of the professionalism, commitment and dedication of the men and women of our Defence Force. And on behalf of the Dobell community and all Australians, I acknowledge their commitment to ensuring we maintain our freedoms. I also acknowledge their sacrifice through being deployed and away from their families and friends, and applaud them for their courage, dedication and service to Australia. And during one of our local ANZAC services this year, Eric Bogle's and the Band Played Waltzing Matilda was recited. And one of the most moving lines from this verse reads, "But as the year follows year, more old men disappear. Someday no one will march there at all. It is our duty as Australians to ensure that the sacrifice of our ANZACs and those who followed in their footsteps are remembered. We owe the success of our great nation to the ANZAC spirit. We owe our freedom to the ANZAC spirit. A minute's silence will never be enough to pay our ultimate respect and gratitude to those who gave their tomorrow for our today. For their sacrifice, we are eternally grateful. We will remember them lest we forget."
I thank the honourable member for Dobell. The